In Rebel Ridge, a former Marine grapples his way through a web of small-town corruption when an attempt to post bail for his cousin escalates into a violent standoff with the local police. Let me know down in the comments what you guys thought of this movie. I'm Brennan Sem for the New Wave Nerds. Subscribe down below for more nerd content and commentary. Now let's roll the intro. Alright, so as always, we're going to begin with a brief no-spoiler review. I definitely enjoyed this movie. I liked it a lot more than the one we looked at last week, which was Back in Action. I certainly wouldn't classify this as a popcorn film, but it definitely is going to keep you interested, keep you invested, and keep you on the edge of your seat. I loved the cast list. I thought the writing and directing was surprisingly good. I went into this expecting it to be garbage, I'm not gonna lie. I expected to not like it at all, but it definitely exceeded my expectations, and I think it's absolutely worth a watch. I think it's incredibly fun. It's currently available now on Netflix, and like I said, I would definitely recommend watching it if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Aaron Pierre, or if you like a good crime thriller. Now, I mentioned Aaron Pierre. I want to say at the outset here that he is the only reason that I watched this movie. As I've mentioned before and in past episodes, I'm incredibly excited for the Lanterns TV series, the introduction of the Green Lantern Corps in the DCU, but I was really unfamiliar with both of the main actors, both Kyle Chandler and Aaron Pierre. And so I watched this, and I can honestly say that I'm even more excited for the show than I was before, and longtime listeners will know that that is certainly saying something. In this, Aaron Pierre plays the former Marine who has to battle through this web of small-town corruption, and I think he plays the role incredibly well. He does this calm, cool, collected persona as though it's second nature to him. It felt very natural, and that is exactly what I'm looking for in Jon Stewart. I think that the acting and the skills portrayed here will transfer over very well to that show, and I'm really interested to see what is going to happen there. I can't wait until we start to see some set photos and an eventual teaser and full trailer for that. I hope that that lives up to what I want it to be in my head, but after seeing Aaron Pierre here, I am even more excited, and I think he's going to knock it out of the park. But now, let's get into the actual meat of this movie. So we're going to be talking spoilers here, so this is your final warning. Again, the movie is available on Netflix, so if you do not want to be spoiled, then go ahead and take a quick watch, and then we will be right back here to pick up where you left off. Okay, so I do want to begin by talking about some of the things that I think weren't necessarily done so well in this movie, and then I'll end out talking with a little bit more of the things that I enjoyed. My main problem with this is that I feel as though the pacing is a little bit off. It definitely drags a little bit in the middle, in the second act, and ultimately the end felt a little bit anticlimactic. I think that it could have done a better job about making things be more immediate, I suppose, is probably a good way to describe it. Like I said, I enjoyed the movie. I really like the story here. I think it's very well done, but I do think it drags a little bit, and I felt like, so the movie is 2 hours and 11 minutes. I felt like if you had chopped off that last 10 minutes or so, they would have been able to tighten up the story and make it a little bit more, what's the word I want to say here? Make it, I guess, gallop a little bit more. Make it feel a little more like everything is happening at a steady pace. Now, that being said, I realize that I just said I feel like the movie could have been better served if they chopped off the last 10 minutes. But on the flip side of that, I do wish that the B plot had been a little bit more explored here. There's one character in particular who I feel could have done with a little bit more screen time, a little bit more character development, and that is, what is the character's name? Summer, I believe. Yes, Summer McBride, played by AnnaSophia Robb. Fun fact, children in my generation, anybody who was in elementary school after the year of like 2008 will likely be familiar with her. she's the main girl from Bridge to Terabithia, which, spoiler alert, if I remember correctly, she dies. But I haven't seen her in anything else, so I was really surprised to see her here. She did a great job, I will say, but I feel like the character herself could have used a little bit more development, could have used a little bit more, like I say, screen time, and I felt like if that had been developed a little bit more, that might have helped with some of the pacing issues. I wish that we had been able to spend a little bit more time dealing with her life. So in the beginning, she's just introduced as somebody who is, helping Aaron Pierre, who is helping him get to the bottom of what's going on here, helping him release his cousin from custody. And then in the second act, we learn that Summer is actually like a recovering addict who has lost her family. Her husband has divorced her because she is an addict, and presumably because of other things as well. They imply that, or maybe they even outright say that the husband was like looking for any excuse to end the marriage. But she has lost her family. She has lost custody of her child, and she is attempting to make her life better. I wish that story point, that plot had received a little bit more attention, right? I think that would have raised the stakes for somebody who isn't just Aaron Pierre here. Because that is one thing that I will say. Throughout this movie, it does feel like the stakes are very limited. They are there, don't get me wrong, but it feels like there is not enough urgency in this film, especially when it pertains to Aaron Pierre. Once events transpire and he's unable to save his cousin from the prison, I feel like the focus should have shifted a little more heavily to Summer, because that's where the stakes really lie, right? Because she has, her child is, she's battling for custody to be able to see her child. She is battling for the opportunity to play a part in her life. And the web of small town corruption, I really enjoy that phrase for some reason. The, corrupt police chief and judicial system and the entire apparatus of the city here is working against her to make sure that she stays quiet, doesn't expose the wrongs that are going on here. And the way that they do that is fairly interesting. So again, we learn that Summer is a recovering addict, and she has taken a job at the courthouse, at the town hall, and one of the requirements for her employment there is that naturally she stay away from all drugs and from all illicit substances, right? And so then the way that the corrupt police officials attempt to keep her quiet is they forcibly inject her with some drugs, right? And she's refusing to go to the hospital because she knows that if she goes to the hospital, then it will go on her record. And because of that, she will lose her job. And more importantly, she will lose the ability to see her child. Again, that whole thing really only happens and really is only really important for like 10 minutes out of the whole movie. We get the scene where she is drugged. We get the scene where she calls Aaron Pierre. He's like, hey, we should go to the hospital. And she says no. And that's pretty much the extent of it, right? And again, I wish that had been a little bit more developed. I wish that had been at the forefront of this movie just a little bit more, because that's where the stakes lie. Like, this is the person who is being directly affected by the small town corruption here. Aaron Pierre's character, Terry Richmond, is not really. Now, obviously, he quite literally is affected because, the whole thing is about him posting bail for his cousin, he has been arrested for a drug charge, a possession charge, and Terry is trying to save his cousin because the cousin turned state's witness, and if he goes to the state prison, then he's going to be, how do I put this lightly, accosted by members of the gangs who would likely not be happy with the fact that he snitched, right? And that doesn't obviously end well for the cousin, but once that happens, the stakes for Terry are gone. And that happens at roughly the halfway point. If I'm remembering correctly, it's somewhere around the halfway point. All of the stakes for Terry Richmond just disappear, right? They just disappear. He's ready to leave. He has failed in his mission, and so he is looking for transpo to get the F out of there. His exact words, I felt like that line was not well written, but whatever. In any case, he's looking for a way out, right? And so the thing that brings him back is Summer. The thing that gets him further involved in this web is Summer. And I just wish that she had gotten a little bit more development to make it, to really exemplify the fact of how serious the web of small town corruption is. I wonder how many times I'm going to say that throughout this video. But in any case, that is certainly, I think, a failing of this movie. I think it would have made it better. Not that the movie is bad. Like I said, I enjoyed the movie. I think it's very well done. But I think that would have fixed some of the problems with the pacing and all this. Now, as I mentioned, the ending for this movie is a little bit weird, right? So we get this climactic battle, I suppose, this climactic scene where Terry Richmond confronts the police and is eventually, essentially taken captive. And this is when the actual corruption of the police force is fully laid bare, even to the other officers, right? So this is the moment when the good police officers are starting to realize, okay, well, the chief is not doing what is right here. The chief is looking out for his own self-interest and not for the interests of the community. This is not why we signed up. So this happens. A major catalyst event happens. A cop who is working with Terry and Summer McBride covertly, I believe they call him codename Serpico, he reveals himself to everybody and reveals the fact that he is, working against this corruption here. And because of this, he gets shot in the leg by the chief. Big moment, right? Now they go out, they do the rest of this battle where Terry is awesome and, saves the day. He steals one of the police chargers, I think they are, a police car. I don't know if it's a charger, but in any case, he steals the police charger, turns on the light, which activates the dash cam with pre-event recording so that there is a record of the police chief shooting his own officer, and they drive away. Now, the secondary villain here is another police officer who I feel like he also should have maybe had a little bit more going on here, but I don't know. In any case, he basically leaps onto the car to try and stop Terry Richmond and Summer and the good officer Serpico, whose real name is Evan Marsden. He is trying to attempt them to escape, and he latches himself onto the door. He's hanging on the outside. Terry's driving. Summer is coming to after being drugged for a second time, and she pushes his face away from the car, so he tumbles down the road. Now again, he's the secondary villain here, so I felt like his defeat maybe should have had a little bit more impact. Maybe there should have been a little bit more of a climax here. She pushes him out, and then they're engaged in this chase. I almost said high-speed chase, but it's a low-speed chase because one of the tires of the police car that Terry is driving, its wheel gets shot out. Or the tire gets shot out. You don't shoot out a wheel. But in any case, so they're doing this low-speed chase. They have a good conversation between the three of them where we're like, what do we do? Should we pull over? And Summer McBride, still kind of zonked out of her brain, is in the back seat going, no. And so they continue driving. And then at this point, this is the true ending of the conflict for the film. And this moment I felt was very, very anticlimactic. So all of the police are chasing Terry Richmond. The chief is in like a big SUV. I think it's an Escalade, not that that really matters. And he's driving up, and they're like, we're going to do a pit maneuver. We're going to do this strategy to, basically pull them over and incapacitate them. And the rest of the cops eventually, in this moment, decide that they are going to work against the chief. He is dirty. We're taking him out. And so they do the pit maneuver against him, and his SUV careens off the road, and then Terry Richmond, it's called over the radio that they are going to give Richmond an escort to the nearest hospital so that they can save Officer Evan Marsden and Summer McBride. The ending just overall felt very, very anticlimactic. Again, this is the moment where I really felt like the pacing was off. It felt weird, like it was the end, and you can tell it's the end, but it didn't quite feel as epic, I suppose, is maybe the proper word. It didn't feel quite as epic as it should. It felt like, again, I guess it's just it felt like the stakes weren't necessarily really high enough. I don't know. It's hard to explain, and I think I'm maybe doing a poor job of it, but the ending just did not feel as satisfying as it should have been, because this whole movie is this really, really interesting power struggle between Terry Richmond and Chief. His name's Sandy, Chief Sandy, played by Don Johnson, who does a great job here. It's this really interesting power struggle where there's a lot of tension, and these guys are like facing off back and forth. And then the conclusion, it just felt like it did not necessarily live up to the tension of the first, hour and a half, say, of the film. I don't know. It just felt very, very weird. And so then that's another area where I think that the script could have been a little bit better. But like I said, I think overall the movie is incredibly fun. I think the performances by practically everybody involved are really good. I already screamed the praises of Aaron Pierre. I thought he did amazing. Don Johnson as the chief, he is so good about playing this like country slimeball is the word that's coming to my mind, but I don't feel like that's necessarily like quite accurate. But he does such a good job of playing that role. And I do think the writing for the character of the chief is really, really interesting, because he is, again, it's like this power struggle, but he's also pragmatic, right? Like he attempts to make a deal with Terry. After we find out what happens with Terry's cousin, I suppose I should say that he gets shanked, things we were trying to avoid. He gets shanked by a gang member and ultimately dies en route to the hospital. But after, I suppose this is the scene where Terry finds out about that. He the chief makes Terry a deal. He's like, hey man, let's just forget about this. We paid for the truck that you were going to use to get out of here. We're giving you the money back that we took from you. You just leave and we can avoid this. He's like, there's blame to go around here. Everybody involved, is sort of at fault. Let's just move on. Let's move on, get on with our lives. He's a very pragmatic guy, and I think it's a really, really interesting job. I like a lot of the scenes with the chief. He was a very effective antagonist and villain here. I really, really enjoyed it. Now, on characters that I think could have also used a little bit more development, I'm going to say the officer Evan Marsden, the guy who is, codenamed Serpico. He's the character in the beginning who pulls over Terry Richmond and takes the money that Terry was going to use to bail out his cousin and seizes it. It's what is the word? A civil asset forfeiture, takes it for the county, and that's the whole thing that sets off the entire movie. But then after that, we really, really don't see him at all. Like, I'm trying to remember, and I don't think that we get any scenes of him between the beginning and the very end when he reveals that he is actually working with Summer McBride. I wish that we could have seen a little bit more of him throughout this. You know, obviously you don't want to be heavy-handed because part of this is the mystery, who is Serpico. So you don't want to be, you know, over the top with him, like questioning the orders of the chief or having conversations with Summer McBride or anything like that. But maybe a scene or two of him, I guess, subtly working as an oppositional force to the chief, I think would have made that moment of the movie more satisfying. But like I said, I think it's very, very well done. I think it's definitely worth the watch. I thought it was incredibly fun. This is such a great, like, mid-budget movie. Let me look on IMDb here. I believe the estimated budget is $28.9 million, which is a lot of money for us average Joes. But in the movie making space, that's like a steal. That's a steal. And I really enjoyed that. I saw an article a long time ago, maybe 6 months or so, which isn't that long of a time. But I saw an article of Jude Law, like, lamenting the loss of the mid-budget film, because all of the movies that are released in theaters now are pretty much, they're either established franchises, or they're these big box office blockbusters. And I do sort of agree with that. It's nice to see these lower budget films, but I think one of the things that sort of hamstrung this movie is the fact that I had never even heard of it. I had literally never heard of it. You know, I had never heard anybody release an article about it. I didn't see any of the marketing. And I just think it's the fault of the streaming. I think it's the fault of the streaming services, right? Like, obviously, don't get me wrong. I think it's probably overall a net positive that things like these streaming services are actually trying to put money in the industry and produce their own culture, their own products, and to increase the output like that. But I think if you do a film like this and only release it on the streaming services, I do think you hamstring it a little bit. I think you do. I think this one would have actually gone over very well in the theaters. Now, I'm not going to say it's going to be, $100 million hit or something like that, but I think that it would have done well. And I think it would have been more enjoyable to see it in a theater setting rather than just sitting on my couch. But overall, I think that this movie deserves a decent amount of praise, and I think it's absolutely worth the watch. If you've got 2 hours, if you're looking for something to watch, I cannot recommend Rebel Ridge enough. Let me know down in the comments if you guys agree with my assessment here, if you thought that this movie was very good, or at least decently good, and if you thought it was terrible and disagree with me, then keep your bad opinions to yourself. No, I'm just kidding. Let me know down in the comments. Let me know if you hated it. Let me know why you hated it. In any case, I'm certainly excited after seeing this. I'm really interested in seeing what Aaron Pierre is going to do with the lanterns and what he's going to do in other movies moving forward. Now, let's see. Next up on the docket this Thursday, I'm going to be taking a look at Aquaman #1, the most recent series written by Jeremy Adams. I've got quite a few thoughts on that, so I almost said stick tuned again, which was the mistake I made in the last episode. Stay tuned for that. And then next Tuesday, I will be back here to review the very first John Wick movie. Somehow I hadn't seen it up until this point, but I finally watched it, and I've definitely got some thoughts. So stick around for that, and make sure that you like and subscribe for more content and commentary, and I will see you guys on Thursday.